like that Sweet Home Alabama, too. Really resonant of San Francisco, don't you? It's my great pleasure to introduce the next storyteller, and you will know right away why she's telling the kind of story she's going to tell. You will know that because her entire family, well, give or take, is in the front row. Except the one who's almost family. Please welcome.
Loves a love story. Well, you're in the right place. This story begins with my grandmother, Tecla Baldicano Santiago. It was the end of World War II, and it was in Manila, the Philippines. Now, in 1946, the U.S. Army was still segregated, with whites and Negro or colored troops assigned to separate units. To be an officer in the Army was fairly rare if you were a Negro. And there was widespread prejudice that light-skinned Negroes get the leadership positions. Now, this was the end of the war, though, and all Americans were welcomed by the Filipinos because we had worked side by side with the Filipino forces to push the occupying Japanese out of the country. Well, Tecla Baldicano Santiago is my grandmother. She lived in the tiny village of Tui, which is where she grew up. You could tell by her erect posture and her uplifted chin and the bun in the back of her head that she really had determination and resolve. Now, when she was in Tui, she was known as a beauty. But that was lifetimes ago. Her husband had deserted her to play in the National Filipino Baseball League. He left her with 4 young children. Nito, her young son, Aning, her eldest daughter, Nieves, called Eves, and Gloria, my mother. She had to raise those kids alone, and it wasn't easy. During the war, she had to protect her young girls from the unwanted attention of Japanese soldiers. She dressed them in burlap. Their feet had dried, maybe blood, but mostly mud, around their feet and between their toes. Their hair was dirty and unkempt, to be as unattractive as possible. She also had to teach her children how to survive in the war. Some nights, way at the end of Tui, there was a little hut, and you could hear screams and cries of agony as a captured American soldier was tortured. The villagers knew that the next day, everyone would be rousted from their homes, and all the villagers were made to line the dirt road that ran through the center of Tui. Tecla Santiago taught her kids to look straight ahead at absolutely nothing, to say absolutely nothing, as the Japanese soldiers dragged the American in front of them, looking for any flicker of recognition. One day, one of the Filipino men gasped and averted his eyes when the bloodied American stumbled toward him. He was yanked out of line, made to kneel, and shot in the head as an American collaborator. Now, at the end of the war, Tecla Santiago had to flee from her village, Tui, because she had caught the man who said he wanted to marry her trying to molest her middle daughter, Nieves. She bundled up all the kids and she went to Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines. There she was determined to rebuild their lives and continue to protect her girls. So at this point, she was in Clark Air Base, and she was walking her 16-year-old daughter, Gloria, to her very first job as a clerk typist. she was also holding her hand. As they walked into the base, she was saying, "Sige na, hurry, hurry, Glory, you don't want to be late on your first day." Now, Gloria Santiago was wearing her school uniform. She had a navy blue skirt that was pleated, white blouse, and the tie had an embroidered crest of the school on it. Because she was a captain in the school, she got to wear this jaunty little navy blue cap. Now, Gloria had beautiful caramel sun-kissed skin, and it was complemented by her hair that she usually wore flowing down her back and bouncing gently against her waist. Gloria's eyes shone with excitement and curiosity. "Look, Mama!" And she's pointing to the 6 giant army green trucks that were rumbling by. "Mama, look!" And way, way at the end of the pier, the end of Clark Air Base, was a giant gray ship. She nudged her to look at the long lines of the Army soldiers who were walking by in their camouflage uniforms and their black boots. Mrs. Santiago did not miss that some of those soldiers gave admiring glances to her beautiful and vivacious daughter. Now, my mother, by her own declaration, is the worst clerk typist in the world. Her mother dropped her off at Bungalow 18, saying to her, "Glory, be good, work hard. I will come for you at the entrance to the base when you're done." And then she was introduced by Second Lieutenant William Clement to the people in the office and oriented as to her job. Well, her trash can was overflowing with paper that she yanked out of her black manual typewriter every time she made a mistake. It's a good thing, well, I wish they had whiteout in those days. That was tough. But Second Lieutenant William Clement, just like everyone else in the office, found her very endearing. She had a wonderful sense of humor. She had a sweet and bright spirit, and she had a real positive, friendly attitude. Well, when they were in the office, young soldiers would come by and leave her a flower on her desk, or other soldiers would come by and leave her candy that they bought at the PX. Even the captain of the office was attracted to her. "Gloria, would you like to go to a movie with me?" Well, not wanting to hurt her boss's feelings, she said, "Oh, okay." And then she gave him the wrong address to her house. Now, the next day, she came to work fearfully, and it was Bill who she confided. "Bill, I am so scared. I think I'm going to be fired today. The captain asked me out, and I gave him the wrong address of my house." And Bill said, "Glow," that was his nickname for her. "Glow, he'll understand. Let me talk to the captain." Well, that's when Gloria was sure that this was the man who could be her mentor. He was already her protector and her confidant. But actually, they became friends, and they started taking walks on their walks on the beach during their work breaks. And then Bill started courting her in earnest. He taught her English. They played sports together. He said, "Glow, I love to watch you compete. You are so athletic. Every time we play beach volleyball or softball with the other units, we can't lose with you." Well, Bill and Glow were spending a lot of time together, but mainly during work and work lunches and breaks. So sometimes Gloria would tell her mother that she had to work on a Saturday. And on Saturday, they would meet in the local cemetery because it was beautifully maintained. There were lush tropical flowers all around and green manicured lawns to honor the soldiers who had died there. my mother insisted that he teach her how to drive an Army Jeep. So they took the driving lessons, and one day they had parked by the beach, and as Bill went toward the sand, she surprised him, scooted over to the driver's side, and just because she couldn't find the reverse, she still hit the accelerator, and it popped up and cleared the log that was was marking the parking space. It got stuck. That was the end of her driving lessons. Well, Bill and Glo were spending a lot of time together. And one evening, when the sun was setting, they were walking together. Bill pulled a little blue velvet box from his pocket. He said, "Glo, ini ibikita." She said, "Bill, you have been practicing your Tagalog. That's very good." "Oh, what are you doing?" And he was on a knee in the sand. He looked up at her and said, "Glo, you know I love you more than my life, and I want us to be together always. I'm going to be receiving orders to leave the Philippines in a few months, and I want you to come with me as my wife. Will you marry me?" She looked at the little box. She said, "Oh, Bill, you know I love you. I love you with all my heart, but I cannot marry you." And he stood up. He said, "Why? Why not?" And she said, "Well, Aning, my mom's eldest daughter, we call her Mama Aning because she's like a second mother to me. And Evs is older than me, too. My mother would be so uncomfortable if I was to marry before they do." He said, "Oh, Glo, I know we can work through that together. That's not going to be a problem." She said, "Well, also, Bill, you are not Catholic, and my family is very, very devout. I know my mother would be very uncomfortable if I was to marry somebody who's not a Catholic." He tried to pull her toward him. "Glo, we can work through this." And she gently pulled away. She said, "It is not the biggest problem. The problem is Hongkong Pier." He got a little puzzled. He said, "Hong Kong what?" She said, "Hongkong Pier. You know, you see the ship way, way out, docked by that pier? It is said that when an American soldier has a Filipino girlfriend, or fiancé, or wife, when the soldier gets the orders to go back to America or to another country, the ship sails with the soldier, and the girl is left standing on the pier alone. My mother's friend, she has a daughter who was left hung on pier with a baby. My mother would be too uncomfortable. There's no way that we can marry Bill." Well, they talked and talked, and they finally decided to be secretly engaged. He gave her the little ring that was in the box, and if you got the sun to hit it just right on that little diamond chip, it could glint. But she couldn't wear the ring on her finger. She had to put it on under her bra strap, pinned to her bra strap, so they could be secretly engaged. One Sunday, after Mass, Gloria was laying down on her narrow bed in the little bedroom that she shared with her sister Evs. She was watching the wooden ceiling fan, trying to move that heavy, humid air around. Mama Aning was still at the church, and Ev was out with her friends, and Mrs. Santiago was trying to take a nap in the other room. She started thinking, do I dare take this out in the daytime? Just as she was going to take it off of her bra strap, she heard heavy footsteps outside her window, and rap, rap, rap. She said, "Who could be here at this time?" Rap, rap, rap. She knelt on her bed and she looked under the white curtain and peered at the front door. Oh, it's Bill! Jesus, Mariosa. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, please help me. And then she heard again, rap, rap, rap. Then she heard her mother's slippers coming down the hall, going into the living room. And then she heard the door open. Hello? May I help you? Bill was dressed smartly in his dress uniform. He had his full dress uniform and he had his hat tucked under his arm. He said, Mrs. Santiago, I'm Second Lieutenant William Clement, and I want you to call me Bill, though. She said, Lieutenant, may I help you? He said, oh, I was hoping that I might come in and talk with you. Well, Gloria was in the bedroom saying, say no, say no, say no. She heard her mother say, yes, please, come in. And she pointed to a rattan chair for him to sit. And she took a seat on the rattan couch that was directly opposite him. Glory, please get us some tea. So Gloria had to leave the bedroom. And she brought tea in, but her eyes were downcast. She handed one to her mother. She handed one to Bill, but she didn't look at him. She started to go back to her bedroom when she heard, Glory, and patting the seat right behind her. You come and sit with us. Now, Lieutenant, she said, with an erect posture and her fingers laced. Mrs. Santiago said, and now, Lieutenant, is my Glory in any trouble? He said, no, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. I just wanted to talk to you. I wanted to meet you in person. I've heard so much about your family. My family? She looked at Flo. Flo wouldn't look at her. He said, oh yes, I've learned so much about Mama Aning. Glo has told me all about Evs and their adventures, and about Nito as well. Glo? This time Gloria gave her a little sideways glance. And he continued, Mrs. Santiago, I love your daughter very much, and she loves me. She loves you. She loves you. Oh, I see. And he continued. And Mrs. Santiago, I would like to marry your daughter. I want to ask for her hand in marriage. Mrs. Santiago thought a minute and said, Lieutenant, I'm afraid that will not be possible. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry. And she started to get up from the couch. Gloria said, Mama, please, listen to him. Talk with him. I love him, Mama. And then Bill took out of his hat a little blue airmail envelope. And he handed it to Mrs. Santiago. He said, Mrs. Santiago, this is a letter from my mother. From the Philippines, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Mrs. Santiago looked at the letter and she said, Lieutenant, I understand English, but I cannot read it. Would you kindly read it to me? He did. My dearest Mrs. Santiago, I am Edith Clement, Bill's mother. My husband, also named William, and I live in our own modest home in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The letters we receive from our son each month are full of descriptions of you and your beautiful daughter and your beautiful country. They show us his deep love for her and his hopes for a future together. He told us he wants to ask for her hand in marriage. And he wanted your blessing to marry your youngest daughter, Gloria. I imagine you have many questions and concerns about such a marriage. But I want you to know that my husband and I will love her like she is our own daughter. They will always have a home with us, and we welcome her with open arms. My son is a very good and a very kind man. I know he will always honor his wife and provide and protect his family. He loves Gloria very much. I hope we will be able to meet her when they return to the United States. With all our love and with deep respect, Edith and Bill Clement. Mrs. Santiago sat there and then stood up to get the letter. Bill put it in her hand, and she took the letter, walked to her bedroom without a word, and closed the door. Bill and Glow didn't know what to say. He took a deep breath. And then Bill returned to Clark Air Base where he lived. Days dragged. Weeks passed. Not a word from Mrs. Santiago about the marriage proposal. Finally, she relented, but she demanded that they enter the 6-week marriage counseling, premarital counseling program with the Catholic priest. And at the end of the premarital counseling, he had to sign a contract that any and all children that came from the marriage would be raised Catholic. He was agnostic, but he signed. He made that promise. Well, Bill and Gloria were married. They were married on April 29th, 1947. You could see him in his khaki uniform. He was so proud of that khaki uniform. It was starched and had pleats down, creases down the front that could cut butter, and his shoes were buffed and shined until they gleamed. Well, a few months later, Bill got his orders, and they were to be stationed in Japan. Can you imagine what Mrs. Santiago went through, thinking about her youngest daughter being married to an American soldier who was not even Catholic and being taken from her family and her country to the land of their enemy? Well, Bill and Gloria did get on that big gray ship, and they played. He used to be a gymnast and a weightlifter. Well, in Japan, when my mother told us about being in Japan, she said it was the most idyllic time for newlyweds. They had a little cottage right on the Nagaro River, and that's where cherry blossoms came out in the spring, and hundreds of cormorants migrated there. Beautiful vision. The Japanese neighboring women adopted my mother, as did the African American officers' wives, and they taught her how to cook and play bridge. Glow and Bill were married for 42 years. They traveled all over the world together. They had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I'm the eldest and a recovering Catholic. This is Bill and Glow's love story, but it's also a story about fierce and boundless mother love. Thank you.